I got a job at a local newspaper that was paying basically nothing. And then I got laid off. And all of a sudden, my student loans had ballooned up to $33,000. I was out of work. I was on unemployment, and I was terrified. So I decided that then and there that when I got a new job, I would figure this whole money situation out. I was going to make a budget. I was going to figure out how to pay off my debt so that I just wouldn't ever be that terrified with money again. And I kind of made making money and paying off my debt my entire hobby slash personality.
Welcome to the Real Estate and Financial Independence Podcast. I'm your host, Chad Carson. You can also call me Coach, and this is a show all about helping you get out of the financial grind so you can do more of what matters. Whether you're a first-time listener or a long-time listener, it's always an honor to have you back for another episode. The title of today's episode is How Budget Girl Paid Off $30,000 of Debt and Bought 2 rental properties while on a low income. This is an interview with a fellow YouTuber friend of mine named Budget Girl and who goes in the real world by Sarah Wilson. And this is really a story of 2 parts. Part 1, Sarah graduated from college and had student debt of about $30,000. And she had a really uphill climb. Had a journalism career where she was not making as much money as she had hoped. And also had some challenges with losing a job earlier in her career and not being without work for a period of time and just having that insecurity and that desire to pay her debt off. And so she talks about that journey and using creativity and side hustles and frugality and fun frugality to make that work. But then once she got her debt paid off, she also transitioned and got the bug for real estate investing, and particularly house hacking. And so we talk about her duplex deal. She lives in College Station, Texas, where Texas A&M University is. And so she bought a duplex, moved into one side, and we talk about the details. How does she get the loan? How does she buy it? How does she come up with the money to buy it? What are the numbers, the rent, etc. And then she's also recently gotten into the Airbnb game with a really interesting twist. She has a trailer that she's remodeled, and this is like an RV pull-behind kind of trailer, and she's renting that out Airbnb. And there's some good and there's some bad with that. So we talk about the numbers, all about the numbers today, as you would imagine from Budget Girl. And so it's just a really good conversation that I think you'll enjoy, both the numbers of her deals and her real estate deals, and also just her story, which is very inspiring. Now, before we get to the interview, it's time for my weekly behind the scenes segment where I share a short snippet of what's going on with me in my real estate investing, finances, or business behind the scenes. And so this week I thought it'd be appropriate, since I'm interviewing Budget Girl, to talk about budgets. Now, before you leave and pause this or fast forward, budgets are kind of like talking about taxes, right? Who wants to talk about that? But I want to mention that if you want to make progress with your business, if you want to make progress with real estate investing or progress financially towards financial independence, having some sort of process to organize your money is really important. And that's really what budgeting is. There's a lot of different approaches, and I'm not here to push one approach or another, but I want to tell you a couple stories about what's worked for me and for my wife and also for my businesses for using a way of organizing my money or our money. And one of those, when my wife and I first got married, we used the kind of the old school Dave Ramsey cash envelope system. Now, we don't use that anymore, but I found it a really helpful tool to where every month you figure out, all right, I'm getting $3,000 or $5,000, whatever the number is, and you allocate that money ahead of time into physical cash envelopes. So yes, we would go to the bank, and I think because we were paying rent online, so like a lot of the budget went online, but for the money we were spending on groceries, eating out, entertainment, things like that, we put them in the cash envelopes, and the behavior change of just seeing yourself pay the cash was really helpful for us, and we got a lot out of it. It was a good communication tool for us. It also just kept us on the budget, so it was something that worked for us. So that's one idea that you could take and maybe apply. You can go to Dave Ramsey or somebody, just look up cash envelope system. There's plenty of systems out there. There's another one, though, that we've used and I've used in my businesses that's sort of similar to the cash envelope system, but it's using digital accounts. So there's a system that I have kind of applied in my Coach Carson business, also in our real estate business to some extent, called Profit First Accounting. And the idea is that similar to the cash envelopes, you look at, here's my budget for how much money we're going to make or anticipating making in our business this month or our personal finances this month, and you allocate it ahead of time, and you actually set up several bank accounts. And I think I have, and most of the time, 4 or 5 different bank accounts. For example, in real estate, you'll have one for property taxes and insurance. You have another one maybe if you're paying off some debt and you just want to set that money aside. You might have another one if you're trying to save an emergency fund, or maybe have money for depreciation or for capital expenses on your properties. You set the money aside in that account. So the point is, you spend that money right off the bat. You automatically take that money, and you can do this very easily with online banking now, and just put it in those accounts right off the top. And then you pay your other bills out of what's left over. So I really enjoy having that clarity up front. And so you're not waiting till after the fact to decide where that money's going. You're allocating it ahead of time. And I actually have an operating account. So all of your miscellaneous bills and things that you're going to pay out of your business, you pay out of an operating account that gets its own big chunk. And maybe it's like 40% of the income you're going to make, or 30%. You do the same thing with income taxes. So you don't wait till the end of the year to set aside money for income taxes. You do that every single month, maybe once or twice a month. So that's called profit first accounting. The other one's called cash envelope systems. There's another really simple system for your personal finances that my friend Paula Pant over at Afford Anything talks a lot about, which I've also used, where keep it really simple. If you're not a budgeter, if you don't want to do all these line items and all these kind of nerding out on stuff, just say, how much do I want to save? I want to save 20%, or I want to save 5%, or whatever your number is. Right off the bat, set that aside in a savings account, a goals account, whatever you want to call it. And then don't worry about the rest, just spend it. So there's some approach for everybody, but I think my point here that I really got from Sarah Wilson in the interview today, you'll see, and I've really learned from my own life, having some sort of discipline that works for you for organizing and being disciplined about your money and how much you spend, both in your personal life and your investing, is a integral foundational piece of everything I've done in my business and my financial life. So if you don't have some kind of system, find one of those or another that makes sense for you, that fits your personality. But the main point is do it, because it'll lead to a lot of the good habits of saving money, of having enough reserves, of paying your taxes on time. It all kind of starts with having some sort of system. If you like these behind the scenes segment each week, I want to invite you to stay in touch with me beyond the podcast by checking out one of the online courses that I offer. Online courses are a way to interact with me and let me help you with your own real estate investing. Some courses are available anytime, and others, like my premier course, Real Estate Deal School, is a more of a boot camp style course where you and other students go through live with me as I help you kind of step by step buying your next investment property. That opens once or twice per year. So if you're interested in that course or any of the courses that I offer, you can find out about all of them at www.coachcarson.com/courses. Now let's get started with today's interview. Hey, Sarah, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, I'm thrilled to be here, Chad. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, great talking to you as well. I've always admired your YouTube channel kind of from a distance. We've talked a few times at FinCon, but you do such an awesome job with YouTube and teaching finance and sharing your stories. So I thought it'd be fun. I definitely want to get into your real estate investing, into your duplex, into your short-term Airbnb rental. But I would love just to start so everybody can get to know you a little bit better, going back in time, and maybe just starting professionally with when you got out of college. And I know you had a really interesting story about having debt you had to pay off when you got out of college. So maybe you could just kind of start back at that time period and let's go forward from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So like many people, I wasn't really taught about money as a kid. And I kind of went off to college with a go figure it out attitude. So I took out student loans, and then I took out more student loans to live off of, because that's what the cool kids were doing. And I bought a lot of Taco Bell and sorority stuff with it. And then when I graduated with a degree in journalism, which I was under the impression paid very well for some reason, right. I had $27,000 worth of student loan debt, which is actually not even that much now. I mean, that was 10, 12 years ago. So it was a lot. And it is a lot objectively, especially for someone who was then low income for quite a long time. So I was deferring my student loans. I got a job at a local newspaper that was paying basically nothing. And then I got laid off. And all of a sudden my student loans had ballooned up to $33,000. I was out of work. I was on unemployment, and I was terrified.
Yeah.
It was not good, Chad. So I decided that then and there that when I got a new job, I would figure this whole money situation out. I was going to make a budget. I was going to figure out how to pay off my debt so that I just wouldn't ever be that terrified with money again.
Right. It seems like everybody has their own story, but just that moment of terror that you mentioned, like that, of just, finances are like a thing we don't think about until we have to. And it's just like in our face, and you in your early 20s had to like come face to face with it. And I'm curious, what were some of the things that were going through your mind at that point? I mean, you're being unemployed, not having income. I mean, it's terrifying for anybody, but like, what were some of did you have anybody you could ask questions about, or did you like read some things online? Like what kind of information or mentorship sources did you try to go to at that point?
So my aunt and uncle had told me about good old Dave Ramsey. And so I kind of started with the baby steps program a little bit. But at the time, I was completely financially on my own. I didn't really have any relatives that could help me out or really were in a position to. And I remember sitting in this old antebellum house that I rented the basement out of, where the sheetrock walls were literally falling down, but it was like $200 a month. I'm not even kidding.
Yeah.
Um,
Do what you got to do, right?
yeah, it was a really cool house.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking like, all right, I'm on unemployment, which is like $300-400. I can live and I can eat, but I can't possibly pay the student loan debt. I didn't have any other debt at the time, but I was sincerely thinking like, if I can't get a job in my field, I'm going to have to go back to waitressing. And I was working, like I did catering. I cleaned an ice cream shop at night. I did dog sitting. I had half a dozen jobs in college, and I was feeling like I had this degree that was worthless. And so I spent about 5 months looking for a job. I finally got one in deep Louisiana as a newspaper reporter. So it was a step down. It was $26,000 a year. And I was just like, all right, complete life change. We're going to figure this out. And that was scary.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, and so just geographically, so we can all imagine where you were, where did you go to school, and kind of where did that journey originate before you got down to Southern Louisiana?
It was Mississippi, so not too far. But yeah, I went to Mississippi University for Women in Columbus.
Okay, got it. So you've got,
which is a public school, so it wasn't like a huge private loan debt or anything like that. Right. But it was a lot for somebody who was making nothing.
Yeah, and you're making $26,000 a year, and and that's journalism, such an interesting field. I remember when I was growing up, I would read the newspaper every day, or read the local Atlanta journals where I'm from, and the sports writers, and you always think, okay, those people have really made it, but like journalism's changed so much in terms of how income's allocated, and also how much you have to hustle. I mean, I'm not a journalist myself, but man, what a wake up call to have to realize that you got a job, but you're making $26,000. What did your lifestyle look like at that point? Because you were living in the antebellum house, before. Did you find what steps did you have to take at that point with the new job?
So I moved to Louisiana with my dog and a U-Haul truck that I rented, and I rented out a $400 a month apartment in a very skeezy part of town. Like we heard gunshots some nights. And I started working at a daily newspaper in Hammond, Louisiana, and picked up any additional work that I could. I started really meal planning, and I picked up a ton of extra jobs. So I did secret shopping, where I'd go, like, a company that worked for Walmart would hire me to go to their gas stations and buy cigarettes and see if they carded me or not. That was a fun little gig, where I'd go to Raising Cane's, and I'd have to like count the chicken tenders and see how long it took for them to bring me the food and if it was hot and stuff. And I'd get like $12 for that. So it was really a matter of increasing my income and then also decreasing my expenses, really learning to budget with what I have, buy stuff seasonally. And I kind of made making money and paying off my debt my entire hobby / personality.
Was that something just, again, out of necessity, or did just watching your YouTube channel and seeing a lot of the, the themes you've arrived at, a budget girl and having fun with frugality, which I really appreciate as well. Like, was it something that you kind of had done instinctively, or did you start like borrowing ideas, watching YouTube, looking at other people? Like how'd you come about from that?
So back almost 8 years ago, when I started my channel in that little $400 apartment in Hammond, Louisiana, there were only 3 other financial YouTubers. It was His and Her Money, which is still around and wildly popular today, Lydia Sin of Frugal Debt Free Life, and a channel that's no longer around called Debt is Dumb. And what those people had in common is that they were all married couples with children. And so there weren't as many finfluencers as there are now. I think it's fantastic how many people are talking about personal finance on the internet, but at the time there was no one low income, there was no one single, and I didn't know anyone in Louisiana. So I set my phone up on a bunch of books, took my glasses off so I couldn't see it all, and started talking about my debt. And from there it grew, and that became my hobby.
Yeah, and I want to go back to a point you made earlier about you increased income, you decreased expenses, and having your YouTube channel to share some of the stories about what you're doing to live frugally. But what were some of the other things you did you mentioned a couple just in passing, but this is increase your income, because you had your base job salary. Like, what were some of the ones that really made a difference in being able to save more money and start paying off some of the debt?
So I picked up any extra hours that I could, but my budget was $1,600 a month. That was everything. And so any money I made on top of that, I was able to put towards debt. And that was basically my day job income. So I did some dog training, I did some horse trading. So I'd buy things at like thrift stores and flea markets and stuff like that, and then try to sell them for more. I did a lot of secret shopping. I picked up extra hours at work. I did some freelance photography stuff. And then after about a year, YouTube became an income source. So money started coming in from that, which was fantastic.
Yeah. That was always a surprise for me when I was started doing you're ahead of me on YouTube, but when I finally got monetized and I'm like, wait a minute, like it just paid me $2 like just for me putting up a video. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. And then it gets up a little bit more.
And I also did midnight pizza delivery for a while too.
Oh, wow. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. So I do my like 8 a.m. to usually 6 or 7 p.m. day job, and then go home, eat some dinner, walk my dog, and then go in at 8 or 9 p.m. to work at Hungry Howie's from then to 3 a.m. when they closed.
So you are just pure hustling. I mean, you're working.
Yeah, it was everything.
You're working and whatever came about, you're working and you're creating and you're an entrepreneur as well. When did you realize that you were actually making some traction? Because I mean, you mentioned that moment when you're unemployed and you have all this debt, and that's kind of that hopeless moment. Like, was there a moment when you're like, I think I can get this done, even if I'm not there yet? Like, do you remember any moments like that?
Yeah. So when I paid off the first debt, so I had I had government loans for $27,000 and I had a private student loan for $4,000. And when I paid off that $4,000 debt, which was actually at a lower percentage than the government one was at 7.7%, which is criminal to do that to students. The private one was at like 4%, but I snowballed it. So I did the lowest one first. And when I was able to check that one off, I felt a real sense of accomplishment.
The psychological momentum. This is going to happen. I'm going to do this. So let's, I guess, fast forward a little bit. I mean, at some point you got into real estate, which wasn't in the beginning of your journey, but like how did you kind of bridge that gap between side hustling, being frugal, saving money, and, you know, doing that kind of stuff, and then actually looking at your housing and using that as another lever?
So over the 3 years that I was paying off the debt, I moved twice, once from Louisiana up to Arkansas to be the editor-in-chief of the newspaper there, which came with a small pay bump. Instead of 26, I was making like 32. And then after about a year there, I moved to Texas, where I am now, where I got a much better job outside of journalism. I work at a university now, Texas A&M, and I was in like the last month of my debt-free journey when I moved down here. So everything was about paying off the debt. And then once I did, I kind of took a deep breath and took myself out to dinner. Yes. And then I started saving a big emergency fund because I wanted to be insulated against anything that life might throw at me. So I saved up $10,000, and then I started thinking about what was next. And to be honest, I didn't really think about real estate at all when I was paying off debt. I had to be very like singularly focused. I know some people can do like a bunch at once, but for me, really keying in and not letting myself get distracted was, I think, one of the keys to my success.
I actually want to go there for a minute because I've heard you say before that, and I've heard, I think it's a smart attitude too, that, even as a real estate person down there, you enjoy real estate now, like renting can be a totally logical step at some point in your journey. So could you talk a little bit about your mindset around that?
Yeah, I think people who've gone around saying like renting is throwing away money are really misinformed and are doing kind of a disservice, especially to like my generation and below. And I'll tell you, the Gen Zs aren't having it. Sometimes they go a little far with the housing should be free, anti-landlord stuff. But renting is an excellent option. Until I got to the point where I am now, buying a house would have been a terrible financial decision. And the house that I was living in Mena, Arkansas, had so many things wrong with it. And that thing was cheap. You could probably buy that out for about $70K, but my landlords probably put about $10K into it while I was living there because things kept breaking. Mm-hmm. And if I had to pay for that, I would have just gone so much deeper in debt. My duplex, I spent $13,000 last year on renovating the A side when I had a tenant changeover, and then a ton of stuff for some water mitigation in my backyard because we've had torrential rainfall in Texas, and I'm still trying to deal with keeping water from coming into the house when it rains. Right. So I just put down a deposit for another $6,000 project to get hopefully that really finally mitigated so that water doesn't come in the house. Owning a home is expensive, whether or not you're house hacking it, whether or not you're renting it out, there's risk there. And if you can, have you heard the ceiling floor metaphor with homeowning?
No, I'd love to hear about it though.
So the ceiling floor metaphor for renting versus owning. When you are a renter, your rent cost is your ceiling for what you're going to pay. It's the absolute most. Anything that goes wrong above your rent is going to be your responsibility. Anything that goes wrong at all, it's going to be somebody else is going to have to pay for that. When you own a home, your mortgage is your floor. That is the absolute minimum that you are ever going to pay during a given month for your home. Infinite things could happen. And I'm not trying to like fear monger, but I spent 13 grand last year on my duplex, even though it's a cash flowing home. So I don't actually pay any of the mortgage, but I did pay 13K for maintenance and improvements and renovations and stuff like that. So it's very important to be financially prepared for those out of the blue swings of things that are just going to happen with housing. And renters can't necessarily absorb that. And that's why renting exists. Yeah. It's an excellent opportunity for people who aren't in the place to buy yet.
Yeah, I think that's so smart. And it's so true not to take any messaging or, and just take it wholeheartedly and say, that's always the right thing to do. I mean, there's always nuance, and your situation, everybody's situation is a little bit different. And so you have to, especially with a renting and ownership thing, like you said, you need to be prepared. You need to have your cash reserves and then mentally prepared to be able to deal with that. Some people just don't want to have to deal with the water issues, and even knowing that it could be payoff long run, that's just not what they want to deal with. So yeah, so many personal factors that go into personal finance, right?
I've even seen some numbers run where like a house is not that great of an investment. Like your single family home, the amount that you're saving over renting, if you put that difference in the market, you could end up with a lot more potentially. I've seen some numbers run that way. And I'm like, it's even if you're financially in a place where you could buy, you might not want to.
Yeah, no, and there's actually a couple stories. I think Scott Trench and Mindy over at the BP Money, they wrote a book about that first time home ownership and how owning your own home isn't necessarily as great a deal as you think it is.
You have to run the numbers.
Yeah, unless you run the numbers. And I actually have a mentor down in Florida who he's been in business for 50 years, but when he first started, he rented for the first 10 years of his investing career. He rented his home, and then he bought investment properties on the side. Like, so it was like total opposite. Like he saw that early on that owning your home was not really that great of an investment, whereas owning investments, whether they're stocks or rental properties. So
a little bit of cash flow to pay for your rent. Yeah,
exactly.
If owning a home is like your lifelong dream, it could be worth it. But I'm not saying, I don't think anyone should say it's always the better decision or that renting is throwing money away. I think that's very outdated information.
Agree. And we have financial nerds like us on the YouTube who will call them out on that, right? So you've already mentioned your duplex a little bit, and I think it's really cool that you were focused. You're single-mindedly focused on the debt. You increased your income, you decreased your expenses, you got that dialed in, and then, all right, you got this new season of your life. You got your cash reserves. You're feeling like you could take a deep financial breath, and then you look towards the next phase of your life, and you were interested in real estate. So tell me maybe how that started for you, and then how it led to you doing your first house hack.
So I started investing a little bit after I got out of debt, just the Roth IRA kind of thing. I'd already been keeping my employee match, and I even started investing a little bit in brokerage. But quite frankly, I find stocks boring. Like day trading, not for me. Like deep dives into how stocks are doing. I just VT Sacks and chill over here. And that's the extent to which I want to play with the stock market. To be honest, I own a little Home Depot because I spend a lot of money at Home Depot, but other than that, I just want to set it and forget it. So what is interesting to me is, as you said, real estate. So when I started thinking about like, what am I going to do next? I was paying, I think $665 a month for an apartment here, which was an excellent deal. But then they told me it was going to go up to $900. And I was like, yeah, no. And I had already been looking at houses. I specifically was more interested in multifamily properties because I found it to be less risky than a single family home. I didn't just want to purchase something that I was then going to have to dump potentially more money into it than I was already paying in rent each month. It didn't sound sexy or fun to me. Yeah. So I started looking at multifam, and especially looking into the Bigger Pockets community. I talked with Minnie and Scott a little bit, and I got very interested in house hacking. And so I was looking at multifamily props. I looked for a year. And then at the very beginning of the pandemic, I found this one. And it was on sale.
Nice.
Because people didn't want to buy homes at the beginning of the pandemic.
Yep. There's like a two or 3 month period, right? That, right, or maybe a month and a half,
Yeah, people were real scared, and for good reason. But houses were still for sale, and it was listed for $240,000. This is a 3-2 on both sides with 6 parking spaces and a tiny little backyard, about 5 minutes from Texas A&M University. It was in excellent shape. These are only like 20 years old, and I loved it. And I knew that I could put my stamp on it and do some minor renovations like the floors and painting and light fixtures and stuff. And I thought it could be really good. It also already came with a renter who was a Section 8. So at that point, it was good because that was guaranteed income through the pandemic. I was going to get a check every single month regardless. Yep. Those people kind of ended up trashing my house, but it was good at the time. And now I have a really excellent renter in there. So I currently cash flow $140 a month over taxes, mortgage, insurance, etc. Nice. And I live in it.
So you live in one side, rent the other side out. And what was the rent, Sarah, when you first bought it? Like, what was that person paying? And then what do you have coming in now, just the total rent from that tenant?
It was $1,050 when I moved in, once again, a 3-2 in College Station, Texas. And now they're paying $1,250. And that includes me covering the lawn service. So really about $1,200 a month, which is good and competitive for this area. And I do also rent out part of my side to my boyfriend who lives with me. So he pays $500 a month for the pleasure of my company.
Nice. Well, let's talk about that one, because that's been a cool YouTube video you did that seems to get a little bit of traction on my boyfriend pays rent. So tell me about that. How's the reaction been to that one?
That has been one of the most controversial things I've talked about online, is that I charge my boyfriend rent. And here's the thing. We were splitting rent at my old apartment. We lived together. And when I bought a house, he didn't necessarily want to get a different apartment. So he's getting a good deal. He couldn't get anywhere close to this for $500 a month anywhere else. He wants to, help support me. We're not married. His name isn't on the deed. I cover everything above that. So that $13K that I mentioned all came out of my bank account. His ceiling was set. So he doesn't have to have the household responsibilities of paying for those things that come up, because he has other financial priorities right now. Mostly his student loans. So we get to live together. He gets a really great deal on rent. I get a little bit to pay towards my mortgage. It's a win-win. It came from a lot of financial discussions that were very open among us. He has a lease to protect him and both of us, and we feel really great about it.
Yeah, so financially savvy. But what's been some of the pushback? Why is this controversial?
People either think that I don't respect him because I'm charging him, or they think he should just get to live for free. Okay. I think a lot of the talk or the negative reactions that I've gotten haven't been about his and I's situation. It's been about their own personal financial situation and how they aren't happy with it. So, some people will even say, like, I let my man live for free, or he lets me live for free. And I'm just like, okay, if that works for you guys, but did you talk about it? Yeah. Well, are you happy with it? Because you don't seem happy with it.
Yeah. So you struck a nerve with a lot of people, and that's
my favorite thing to do on the internet.
Exactly. Yeah, you got YouTube, and striking nerves does well for sure. I'm thinking about it
more to like a roommate relationship, the way other people do house hacking. If I were like to have a girlfriend live in here and charge her rent, I don't think anyone would have the issues.
Absolutely. No. Well, I love it. I love that you're transparent about it and you're sharing it and kind of bringing that issue to bear for people. And, it makes financial sense for both of you. So I think it makes a lot of sense.
It helps us both. He gets a break on rent. I get contributing towards my mortgage. And here's the thing. If we ever get married, he'll have been investing in the house.
Right. Exactly. That he'll see how he's learning how it works along the way. Well,
he's become much more financially savvy since we started dating. He's mentioned it a few times. Yeah. He's like, you just have to pick stuff up when you're dating Budget Girl. So we've been together 5 years. He's great.
Yeah. I remember when I first started dating my wife, I was early on in my real estate investing career, and I had this obnoxious car because I was just like, I got to make money and I got to flip houses. I'm going to pay the bills. And I had like signs on my car that said, I buy houses, which are totally obnoxious, but I ended up buying, like I bought a house every year or two, like off of that sign that cost me $200. I'm like, oh, that's a good return on investment. But I went to pick her up for the first date, and I was like, what's she going to say? What's she going to say? And like, she didn't say anything. Just got in the car and like, we went on with it. And like 2 or 3 months later, when we, were a thing, I said, I was wondering if you were going to say something about the I buy houses car. She's like, oh, I just thought you were driving the company car. Like, I didn't think that was your thing,
I was going to say like a green flag if she's down for it, if I'm on a first date and he pulls out a coupon, like I'm interested.
Absolutely. So it was definitely a plus.
Matching is so important.
Yes, absolutely. It was definitely a plus for me. I was all right. She's down with the entrepreneur lifestyle, and we went camping on the first date or hiking, and it was all frugal. So hey, we're good.
Very nice.
But back to your story. That's what we're talking about here. I want to go like back to the numbers of house hacking, because some people there's gonna be people who are just new to the concept, or like, all right, I want to do this myself. Like, what were some of the obstacles to getting that first deal? And let's talk maybe about the money, because that's a $240,000 property. That seems like a really big number. And how did you manage that part of it?
So I did an FHA loan. So I actually had about 20,000 saved because I'd pretty much kept my lifestyle the same as when I was paying off debt. I increased personal and restaurant spending, grocery a little bit, but I'd been living this way for 4 years. Like, I'm not just suddenly gonna start buying like luxury brands and stuff. So I was still increasing my income. Budget roll was still growing, and I was still hustling. It's fun to me, and especially since I was able to drop some of the less fun side hustles and pick up just kind of fueling more into my YouTube channel made me more money. So that was really great, and it was good all around. So I'd saved about 20 grand, and I was the beginning of the pandemic, as I mentioned. So I had enough to put close to 10% down, I think, or at least 5, if I'm remembering correctly. And so I had the option of a conventional or an FHA. And I was just thinking, like, I don't know what the world's going to turn into in a year. Let's put 3.5% down and let it ride and just keep the cash reserves. And that was great. I was able to put, I think, about $3,000 into renovating the side I was moving in, essentially ripping out the tile floors and putting in luxury vinyl plank. I did a lot of replaced all the ceiling fans and lights, did that myself, and painted the whole thing, which was a nightmare, but did it myself. Bought washer and dryer off of Facebook Marketplace, that kind of thing. And it was really great. We were able to move in, and I was paying $140 or $150 a month then towards the mortgage each month. And then I refinanced to get it down, and then I refinanced again. So now I'm down. I started at 3.5%. Now I'm at 2.5.
Nice.
And I use an FHA streamline loan, which is essentially cost free. They absorb 1 month of your payment into loan. And if you just take that money and put it back in, you're essentially neutral. So I think it was about $8,500 down to purchase the property. And then I put about $3,000 more in, moved in, and was paying $150 a month towards the mortgage between Jacob and my renter and me. And it was $1,700 a month. Now it's closer to $1,600, and I'm a little cash positive.
Love it. So just summary of those numbers. You had about $1,050 coming in rent from the other side. Now it's $1,250. Then you have $500 in rent from a roommate. And then, So when you pay your mortgage, your principal and interest payment, your taxes and insurance, all the mortgage insurance, you're out of pocket no more than about $150 a month. That's your, compared to, like, I'm thinking back to your $200 basement, antebellum apartment that nothing worked. You own this property that's going up in value for almost the same amount that you were living in the paying rent, not too long ago. So that's pretty cool.
Well, and the place I had left that I was paying rent at was $665, but they were going up to like $950. Right. I do pay PMI, MIP, which is about $150 a month. But, comparatively to what I was about to have to pay out more in rental prices, it was pretty negligible. And since that's now covered by my renters, I didn't mind it at all.
No, that's, you got in the game. That got you in, got your foot in the door, which is, makes a ton of sense.
This has been a fantastic property, other than the water thing, which flooded my kitchen once, and I'm hoping I'm really close to getting that permanently solved. It's been a fantastic property. And I wish I could buy every other one on this block.
Yeah, you want to do more. You've got the bug now. Well, I know we're getting kind of nerdy on repairs, but I've dealt with a lot of water issues as well, and just if people are scared about that kind of thing, is your house on a slab? Like, is a cement foundation? Is it on a basement? I'm just curious how you're planning to solve that, just so other people can hear that as well.
It is on a slab. We have 2 tiny little backyards, and the whole kind of subdivision is graded slightly this way. So I'm catching water when it falls from the people slightly up the hill from me. Mm-hmm. And it's unfortunately getting kind of stuck on my unit. And the place where it wants to go is into my kitchen versus going downhill. Right. So I've put in a French drain by hand. And then I got gutters, and then I paid $3,000 for it to be regraded, but it wasn't regraded enough, and it actually made it worse. So now I'm paying $6,000 for someone to come in and put in some pans and like river rock a certain section, and then some piping to actually run the water underneath the fence between my and my renter's unit, and then go out around the side of her side of the house to where the water naturally wants to go. And I think that's going to fix it.
Yeah, you're basically doing neighborhood stormwater work that maybe they should have done in the first place, or
that's exactly what the guy said. Is when these were built, they weren't done properly. So it's just one of the things. But that's why I have a duplex emergency fund in addition to my regular emergency fund, specifically for this type of issue. I don't want to spend the money, but it's there in case I need to.
How do you look at that, Sarah? So like you use your emergency fund for something like this, and then is it like a bucket that you then just refill it with your cash flow from your job and your side hustles, and then after that you can then invest money somewhere else once it's filled back up?
Yeah, pretty close. The emergency fund is kind of the first priority outside of my regular bills and like basic investing. Like I'm not going to pause my Roth IRA contributions to refill my emergency fund, but any extra money each month that comes in, instead of throwing it towards my real estate investment fund, which I'm always trying to fuel, it's going to go to the emergency fund until it's back up. So I have a $10,000 personal emergency fund and a $10,000 duplex emergency fund. And I like to keep those topped off.
Yeah, I agree. That's been one of I've made so many mistakes in real estate, but having a reserve fund has been like the best thing I ever did. It got me through 2008, 9, and 10, the Great Recession, when I made a bunch of mistakes. And so I think you're super smart to do that.
So you can fight it out with Scott on that. He thinks I have too many cash reserves. But coming from where I come from, where I was really, really, really broke and terrified, like those cash reserves, it's like a warm baby blanket of like, I'm losing a little bit of money on it for inflation, but when shit hits the fan, I'm ready. I don't have to take on any debt. It's just there.
And I think your experiences have spoken to some of the downside that we all have to be prepared for. Like you lose a job, you lose an income source. When you're relying on your income from your investments, you have to have a big reserve. Otherwise you're toast, you're done. And I think a lot of people who are in jobs, and maybe we can have a debate with Scott on this, but like if you have a steady income coming in from a job, that's sort of a blanket itself, but if you're having to live off your income, or you're having to be a hustling entrepreneur who might go up and down, like reserve funds are a no-brainer in my experience.
Sometimes I think I'm a bit of a fake entrepreneur because I really like my day job. I'm like this, actually I made more money on my side hustles last year than I did on my day job, which was fantastic. Mm-hmm. But after taxes and everything like that, it's not quite as impressive. And I just really like being able to have the day job with the benefits and the retirement and the health insurance and everything like that, and then do the other stuff on the side. And at least until I build up enough of a portfolio and enough of a nest egg that it can kind of replace that security blanket for me.
Yeah, no doubt. You're still growing. So you have multiple sources of income, which is awesome. And you can keep filling those buckets up. And speaking of that, so you've got this duplex, you got it done, you've lived in there, you're reduced your housing costs. Like, how long did it take you to start thinking about like other real estate ventures? Because I want to hear about your short-term rental. Tell people about that as well.
Well, I started shopping for the next place immediately, and I've been looking for 2 years for the next place. But during that time, I was also thinking about, so I really like alternate forms of housing. I love a good shipping container. I love a schoolie. I'll take a yurt, like give me a geodesic dome. Anytime I travel anywhere, if I can stay in something weird and cool, like I am down. Yeah. And I would love to have things like that one day because they're very low cost of entry, especially comparatively to a house. They have their issues, which I've dealt with today, believe it or not, but I think they're very cool. And at kind of still being not low income, I'm very moderate income now, but coming from the place of being low income, I like sweat equity. I can't always throw a ton of money to get like the perfect property, but if I can find a property that I can zhuzh up and put some sweat and tears and blood and work into and make it really nice, that's the way I can build equity. And I enjoy doing that type of work. Like I said, stocks are boring. I would rather paint something until you actually make me paint something and then I hate it. Just
yeah, by choice, by choice painting. Yes.
Yeah. After painting this house, I didn't want to paint again for a very long time. So then I bought an RV and had to paint it. But I found this 1984 Holiday Rambler vintage travel trailer on Facebook. It had been partially renovated. So they had already torn like everything out and started building it back. So all the leaks were fixed, which was the thing I kind of fear about campers. And they had started building it out and then gotten burnt out. So I would have to go in and build out the bedroom and the living room, make it cute, do all of that stuff. And of course, take care of the outside. But it was $4,200, I think. So we rented a car and went up and got it. Nice. And I have no knowledge of campers or RVs or travel trailers, but I am very much a, give it a shot and you'll figure it out type person. Leap in the net will appear. Googling solves everything. And if all else fails, I can hire somebody to help me.
Right, exactly.
And that has always worked out for me. One day it might not, but we'll check back on that.
But the other thing you did was pay a relatively low price. I mean, I'm not saying $4,000 is not a lot of money. It is a lot of money, but at the same time, if you have a reserve fund of $20,000, even if you had to throw the thing away, which you don't want to do, you're in the place where you could absorb it if you had to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had savings. I was saving up for the next property, and I'm like, this could be real estate. This is a tiny house. People live in these. Yeah. And so I spent 4 months and $11,000 more on top of the $4,200. I was all in for about a little over 15, and I made it really gorgeous. And it's now called the Ag Wagon. It's on Airbnb and Vrbo, and I'm a super host, and it has 15 or 16 5-star reviews. And it's really, really cool. It's Texas A&M Aggie themed, so it's like the perfect little game day rental. And it's parked in an RV park because I don't own any land with the house that's too small. So there are some pretty high expenses with it right now, but the idea is to find some land that I can put it on permanently and potentially even like have a couple of cool little things there and make it a little Airbnb village.
Love it. Well, by the way, I'm going to put a link in the show description and also the video description on YouTube of your tour of the Aggie Wagon. It's such a fun tour. I loved it. And
Thank you.
And also someone who lives in a college. I'm in Clemson, South Carolina. So like 100%, everything's football related and like tailgating. The whole town changes when tailgating comes in. And I actually rent my basement out for game day rentals. So like I was a little familiar with that market, but I love the character of your Aggie Wagon and the mugs you have that are all Texas A&M themed. And it's just, you can tell people can have a lot of fun there.
Everything in there was found at like local Goodwills and vintage shops and stuff. So I picked a color theme and just really went hard on it. There were a few things that were a little more expensive because they had to fit like very perfectly, but it was so much fun to shop for and decorate. Like the time of my life to create this little thing. I loved it. I loved every second of it. I want to do it again.
Yeah, well, it's beautiful. The end result is just amazing. And I was amazed just the spaces you were able to really make the spaces work. And I mean, it was a tour, of course, on video, but it just felt like, a lot more spacious and also just like at home, it just felt like a place people would really enjoy. So well done on that. I know people are always curious about business models and the numbers too. So like on that one, you're almost 15,000 all in and you've paid cash for it, I assume in that case. What can you expect on an Airbnb rental to get in rent? Because that's the part that's unknown for a lot of people. Are like, all right, I can rent it for $150 a night or $500 a night. Like, what are these numbers and how often can you rent them? So can you talk a little bit about the business model of Airbnb in general?
So currently the camper rents out for about $80 to $99 a night. There's a $45 cleaning fee, and then Airbnb takes their little cut on top of that. And I've been booked out almost every weekend since we opened right before Christmas. However, I don't want to be one of, those Instagram accounts like that are called like the business hacks and entrepreneurial hustle, where they're like, you know, buy an Airbnb B&B and your first year's profits are like 70K and then like 104K. And they're just these crazy numbers. I have not had that experience, and I would like to do my part to de-romanticize how profitable Airbnbs can be. Okay. Especially unique stays. Yeah. First, I'll pretty much know where you are. There's going to be some competition. So you have to price appropriately. A lot of the smaller Airbnbs in my area are charging about $99 to $115 a night during what is now the off season, which is of course kind of January through April. I think we're going to do a lot better in the summer and in the fall. And specifically in the fall, when there are game days, I'm probably going to be able to charge $250, $300 a night. Which sounds amazing, and it is, but we'll probably have 4 or 5 football games where people are going to pay that in town. Right. You have to remember a football season I'm terrible at sports, which is insane because I own a game day rental, but I have to go in and like tell myself like, when is the football happening? Mm-hmm. And the first time I didn't really understand the away versus home. So I was like mentally blocking out all of them. And I'm like, oh, this is so great. And then I had a little bit of a light bulb moment. There are other dates, of course, graduation booked out, parents' weekends booked out. There are other sports here, none of which I follow, but go Aggies. And you have to remember also with the camper, especially in my situation, I have a pretty high expense cost. So I'm paying $465 a month for lot rent since I'm parked in an RV park right now, which is fantastic that they're letting me Airbnb there. But that's a pretty high ground cost for something that costs $99 a night. Right. At best. So my break even is about 5 nights a month. And so I have to book out at least 3 weekends pretty much. And then there are any expenses on top of that. And in the 4 months that I've had the camper, I've been in the red every single month. Got it. Some of it is growing costs and kind of startup costs. The first month I was still like getting enough towels and stuff like that in there, having to buy amenities. Second month we had the vintage lock that I'd restored on there, kind of crapped out. Had to order a custom one from Canada to the tune of $400 and then get it installed. I've had to have, tradespeople come out, fix the AC when it busted, etc. There's been kind of at least one thing every month that was expensive that kind of took my profits away. Right. Specifically today, I was out there because the septic system is backed up. I got some bad advice from the RV guy who helped me set it up. He said to keep the black tank open to just kind of drain into the system at the RV park and to like kind of rinse it out between each guest, fill it with water, to let it go. Apparently that was not a good decision. And I had Googled it and everyone said to keep your black tank closed and just dump it like every week or so. But he assured me it would be okay. And that's going to cost about $1,400 to fix because the septic has turned into a giant cement brick and it's going to have to be like professionally yoinked out. And I even had to cancel a guest this Thursday because of it. So it's a lot more active than my long-term rental. I still enjoy it, and I'm hoping that I'll flip to the black soon, but it is not all sunshine and roses. Yeah,
you're not going to get in there right away and make a ton of money. Especially, and I love that you're translating your transparent numbers personally to an Airbnb business. Like it's showing the real startup cost and not just the social media, beautiful picture of what it is. So, and I'm sure.
And I might not have these problems if I had bought like a normal house. But there's still going to be costs. There are going to be bad guests. And I've been so blessed. All of my guests have been amazing, pretty much. And I love hosting them. It's my favorite thing. I leave a little Instax camera in there and a little guest book. And I leave it film in it so that they can take pictures and have kind of an instant souvenir of their vacation. Sometimes they leave a photo in the guest book. And it's amazing. But I am currently paying about $300 a month for the pleasure of having that experience. I am building, the business online. I have the Superhost status. I'm building the reputation of the camper in the hopes that one day it will be more profitable. But I do not want to, go out and tell everyone in whatever financial situation they are, start an Airbnb, it'll fix all your problems.
Right.
It's not passive.
Yeah. No, you're active. You're spending a lot of time on it. There's the growing pains, and I feel like it's similar to even the long-term rental. You had to spend money on the water issues, and the warning you gave there is that, hey, overnight owning a property is not going to, be a positive cash flow experience right off the bat. You need to just be aware of that. And I feel like you're doing a great job with the most difficult part, the reputation, the customer reviews. I mean, if you botch the customer reviews right off the bat, you're done, right? Whereas a lot of the stuff that you can fix over the next 6 to 12 months could be, if you find another lot or you could buy a lot for 15 grand or something like that, then you'd have your own spot, or, I know it's but yeah,
it's very hard to find land in Texas right now. I've looked everywhere because Airbnb really is all about the experience. Like if you're unfortunately like in some areas, you're not going to feel safe in a little tin can camper. It has to match the experience that kind of the camper has. So I'm really hoping to find a good spot sooner rather than later. And I'm searching very hard.
No, I understand. Well, imagine just like your other searches, you'll find something eventually. And it can be fun to be creative too. I've found some ways to find lots. And Clemson's College Station's bigger than Clemson, but it's a pretty similar dynamic where, you have off season and you have the high season. And there's also like maybe even like flipping house. Like I've seen people flip a house that had a double lot on it or something, or, find a trailer park that it's a small trailer park and you can turn that around into your own RV park. I mean, there's tons of ways, but it takes a ton of searching, and this is a hot market.
Oh, so yeah.
I get it.
And I had the perfect property. There was this little A-frame. It was so close to campus. It was on an acre and it was only 100 grand. And I put in like a full price offer. I loved it. Like I was already decorating it in my head, and the guy just didn't want to sell it to me. He sold it to a neighbor. I was the only offer, and he used my offer to leverage another deal. And I even wrote letters to like the neighbors to see like, hey, if you bought this property, maybe we can work something out. I really like it. And unfortunately, the person who did buy it didn't write me back. So I'm in the weeds on it.
You're doing it. All right.
We'll get it. We'll get it one day. I just have to be patient.
Yeah. You're doing, I'm impressed with what you're doing and your persistence, and just how you're studying the game. You're learning the game. You're learning what works and what doesn't work. And I'm curious about one of the detailed Airbnb that's been a unique thing in my town. The people I know doing it is that what are the local regulations around Airbnb? Like, are there different rules inside the city limits, outside the city limits? If you could talk about that a little bit, that might be interesting for people too.
So not even like HOA or city regulations, they're like neighborhood covenants that you have to look into. And so that's the biggest thing actually when looking for land now. So inside the city of College Station, it's highly regulated. You have to apply for a permit. You have to pay 8% hotel tax. It's completely disallowed in some areas. In unincorporated College Station, which is where my RV is parked, you can do whatever the hell you want. In Bryan, which is kind of the College Station and Bryan are like intertwined. They're the same city basically. There's more lax, but I also have a feeling there's going to be some regulations placed soon, because they already have some neighborhoods where the local covenants don't allow it in certain neighborhoods, and you have to look for that. So I've even like put in offers on houses, and then doing my due diligence found that like you can't do anything. Right. So I've looked, and I'm looking into all sorts of properties, properties where I can go move in and live and turn part of the land into it and all of that stuff. And unfortunately, it's been kind of a dry run so far.
Yeah. I think regulation to me is one of the bigger gotchas with Airbnb, period. Like I hope it gets solved over the long run, because I think it can be a good solution for a lot of people, but it also has a lot of, there's the affordable housing issue, and people feel like it's taking housing sometimes. And then there's also there's the NIMBY neighbors, not in my backyard. That's always the biggest political force I'm finding in my local town. So, And
I understand there are a lot of like big corporations and companies that, are trying to buy up all the land and houses near College Station and just drop these multifamily properties on them, destroying old homes, raising the rents. And it's becoming much harder for students to find affordable housing to go here. And they're the whole reason that here's a good place to invest. Yeah. So I get everybody's angles. I just want to put my camper somewhere.
Just one spot. Yeah, one spot. I know.
A lot of places also just don't allow travel trailers or non-permanent structures, or they have like building minimums. So you have to build a home on this lot of at least, 2,500 square feet. And it's just, Trying to do something weird is hard, man.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, there's some dues you have to pay to figure out that stuff. But I have 100% confidence you're the person who's going to figure this out. So I can't wait to hear the next
Thank
part
you.
of this story at some point.
That's so
Uh,
kind.
yeah, and I just want to thank you for sharing. And it's just been fun, and I know people are going to be inspired by just the evolution of what you've done, but also just the humility and the humor with you brought along the way on your journey. And I'm thinking just back along your entire journey, Sarah, like, do you have any feedback for people who are in the thick of whether it's paying off debt, they're just in the grind of a job, maybe they are single and they're just like, hey, I'm on my own doing this thing. Like, I'm just curious if you have some kind of big picture feedback, encouragement, tips for people who are trying to get to some of the steps that you've been on your own journey.
It's a slog. It absolutely is. One of the things that helped me specifically when I was paying off debt was to mark the milestones, as I call it. So every time I paid off another $5,000, so my debt hit down to 25,000, my debt hit down to 20,000. I spent the entire time from one of those milestones to another planning what I was going to do to kind of celebrate the next one. And it gave me a lot of motivation. Sometimes it was, taking myself out for a really nice meal or treating myself to something small, usually like $50 to $100. At the midway point, I went to visit my best friend in California. We went to Universal. It was about $400 trip, which, yeah, that could have gone to debt, but it was hugely rejuvenating. So I don't necessarily even know if I would recommend going as scorched earth as I went. I deprived myself of a lot of life living during the 3 years that I was paying off debt, but I think you can go hard to a level where you can still enjoy your life. I was able to find a lot of joy in figuring out new ways to save money and make money. And I gained a lot of friends along the way that had similar mindsets, which was great. I've never been friends with the people who go out and spend hundreds of dollars every weekend at bars. I'd invite people over and everyone would bring an ingredient and we'd make tacos kind of thing. So it doesn't have to be hell. It really doesn't. But trying to get yourself just a few steps further ahead and then, recognizing, looking back at your accomplishments as well is huge. I kept a debt-free chart where I filled in my progress every month and I kept it on my fridge. And that really helped me kind of look forward. Yeah, there was a lot to go, but I was also had already accomplished a lot as well. So figure out ways where you can celebrate what you've already done, take a little bit of inexpensive joy in your life and keep moving forward.
Yeah, I love that feedback, and I think we can all benefit from that, and we can all have our own little charts, whether it's paying off debt or buying a rental property. I mean, it's all a slog, but we have to live in this slog, right? We got to enjoy it. We got to have fun along the way.
Time is going to pass anyway.
Yeah.
You can either do something with the time or not.
Yeah, love it. Beautiful. Well, thank you again, Sarah. And I want to give you a chance to hand off to everything you have going on. So I've already mentioned your channel a little bit, and I know you have other places you hang out online. So if people wanted to stay in touch with you, I'll put links to all this in the show notes and the video description, but let people know where they can hang out with you.
Absolutely. So you can find me every week on YouTube at youtube.com/budgetgirl. You can also find a ton of free resources and freebies and all sorts of stuff like that on budgetgirl.com. I release new articles on real estate and budgeting and how to save money on food and live a better everyday life at budgetgirl.com. And that has a ton of downloadable freebies, including budgets and real estate trackers and all that. Including a track to a millionaire chart. So
nice.
If you're working towards there, I am.
Yes.
You can also find me on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, etc. at Go Budget Girl. Actually, at TikTok, I'm just at Budget Girl, and I don't do much over there. I'm not a good dancer, Chad.
No. Yeah, I do dance, but I don't do it on TikTok. So maybe I need to change that. But I'm going YouTube, all in on YouTube for sure. Well, thank you again, Sarah, and I look forward to following up with you and seeing how everything goes in the near future. So thanks again, Sarah.
Of course. Thank you so much, Chad.
Thanks for listening to this interview with Sarah Wilson, also known as the Budget Girl. I want to invite you to join me again next week. I have another interview this week with Bradley Labrie, and we're going to talk all about negotiating. So buying deals and buying investment properties is the most important part of your real estate investing business, because if you don't have the property, nothing else really matters. And we talk with Bradley. He's an investor. He's also a real estate agent, about what's actually involved in negotiating and getting deals done. He's a real estate agent who works with a lot of investors. And so we kind of peel back the curtain and talk about the conversations, the negotiations, the way an investor agent and their buyer, the investor themselves, how you work together well to be a team and actually buy properties, especially in a competitive environment like we see in 2022. So if you've ever wanted to up your game with the negotiations, this will be a conversation for you, and I'll hope you join me next week. If you like the show, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to my free email newsletter at coachcarson.com/REI toolkit. In addition to weekly updates, articles, and behind-the-scenes tips from me, my email newsletter subscribers get my real estate investing toolkit, which includes a property closing checklist that I actually use when I buy properties, a real estate deal worksheet, a tenant screening criteria checklist, and other spreadsheets and goodies that will help you on your journey to financial independence using real estate. You can get it all for free at coachcarson.com/REI toolkit. I also want to take this time to thank some people behind the scenes who make this podcast possible each and every week. This includes my podcast editor extraordinaire, Michael Wynn, my amazing virtual assistant, Megan Thompson, my wife, Carrie, who helps me behind the scenes and is my partner here at Coach Carson. And of course, thank you to all of you, the listeners of this show who make everything possible. This show exists for you. It exists because of you. And I really appreciate you being here for another episode. Everything I've shared with you in this episode has been for general education purposes. I have not considered your specific situation or risks. Before buying your own investments, be sure to consult a financial, real estate, and/or a legal professional. Until next time, I'm Chad Carson. You can also call me Coach, and this is a show all about helping you get out of the financial grind so you can do more of what matters. See you next time.